And we are live. Welcome everybody to another episode of Hail Xal'atath. You might have noticed we didn't have an episode last week, but this is episode 9, so it's not that you missed it, there actually wasn't one. Hello Manny, how are you doing?
Hello, Discording Kitty. I am doing all right. I am, relaxing, trying to get the vibes back. It's been a bit of a rough time, in the world, and not even the World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft's been doing actually pretty decent. We're gonna be talking about that soon, but just needed to get my mental together. Needed to get a little bit to recharge, and I thank you for you sticking with me, and we're back today.
We're back, yes. So, as you say, the World of Warcraft is actually doing really, really well because we got some very exciting news. We had the Warcraft Direct the other day, and it is November, so it would be, usually it would be BlizzCon, but there isn't a BlizzCon this year. So instead they did this Warcraft Direct, and I think they must be a little bit happy that there wasn't a BlizzCon because they announced a lot of really cool stuff. Not entirely sure it would have been a BlizzCon's worth of stuff. I mean, it would be for me because of one of the announcements, but yeah. So we're sort of in this weird place where we've got all this news that it's definitely BlizzCon vibes, but it's not BlizzCon, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think the difference between this year BlizzCon and what we would have received is actually what happened before BlizzCon. We got a lot of news that would have been held off. We didn't get the pre-BlizzCon drought of stuff. Hearthstone announced their entire year of releases and then did their part in Blizzard Direct. We had all of this stuff for Diablo with their fireside gatherings and that. And so that wasn't part of the Warcraft Direct because this was pretty much genuinely focused on Warcraft, except for a cheeky little crossover with StarCraft and Warcraft. They're doing Heroes of StarCraft expansion in Warcraft. Something people have been speculating about for a long time, and Blizzard had been like, yeah, no, we're just gonna keep it Warcraft, and like there's enough stuff to mine there. And then, times change, as Grosh would say, and we get this. Are you playing Hearthstone at all? I know this is not the Hearthstone podcast, but are you playing Hearthstone at all?
I don't play Hearthstone. I am terrible at card games. But I appreciate Hearthstone because I'm always using the artwork. You can get the most amazing artwork thanks to Hearthstone cards. So I follow Hearthstone. I'm always very excited when a new expansion comes out because it means another new round of amazing artwork. Playing it, I can't. I'm terrible, I'm afraid.
I don't think anybody is truly terrible at card games. It is just the learning curve and how people learn is different for everybody. And I always hate those people at and this is with a bunch of games because I play like Magic the Gathering. A couple of friends have tried to get me into other games, and there's always that friend that will teach you how to play in the worst way. It's like when you're trying to play like a fighting game. It's like, okay, I'm gonna teach you how to block by pounding you down until you learn that block. So I think that there are bad teachers, but I don't think there are any truly bad players in card games. But that's a story for another day. I do love the art. I do love the side stories and stuff. I used to play Hearthstone a lot more, not as much, but that is, I think, a story I would do on a different podcast because we're here to talk about what we loved. And so I got to ask you, let's not go to your big favorite announcement, but excluding what we're definitely going to be talking about later, what do you think were some of the cool, smaller announcements?
Well, the first thing I have to bring up is I have to gloat a little bit and say, I was right. We're going to the Undermine. That was my prediction, and there we go. I'm so excited that it's going to be the whole patch is Undermine. It's not just a raid. That's fantastic. And there's so much about it as well. Like, one of the things that I haven't seen people comment on a great deal is the fact that we're getting, basically it's the Hot Rod, which is the really cool car that you get to play around with in the Goblin starting area. Ever since playing my Goblin, I have, like, creating my Goblin back in Cataclysm, I have waited and waited and waited to get my Hot Rod back, and it's finally coming. And they're introducing it with what sounds like the ground mount version of dynamic flight. It was clearly something they always wanted to at least experiment with. And this is very much, we can probably expect this to be an experiment that could very, very much end up just being one zone specific, and you'll never see it outside Undermine. And I don't really know if I care, if it's not going to make it out. I am surprised to realize that I don't care, that this probably means we won't have flying in the zone. Because the thought of zooming around on these cars, especially if you can crash and have it be glorious, it's just so perfect for goblins. I love the idea. And it's so funny because it sounds so incredibly unsafe, which again, just perfect for goblins.
Okay. I don't give you flack often, but I have to give you flack here. It is really nice when you get to say, I was right. But the level at which you were right is remarkable. You're like, oh, I wanted that hot rod back, and I hope we get that hot rod back, and we're getting that hot rod back, and it's a major feature. Oh, I wanted to go to Undermine, and we're going to Undermine, and it's like the entirety of the expansion. We have been saying, man, we want to see these cultures in just fleshed out and not be the caricatures, and we directly pointed at goblins as like some of the worst offenders, and bam, there it is. We said, hey man, it's real bad, man, let me tell you, man, come closer to the camera, guys, man, it's really bad that we keep on having to deal with these horde characters, but I would do it for Undermine to take down Gazlo. And what are we doing here? Like, I'm sorry, guys, if you want to start the conspiracy that Discordian Kitty's got the inside line with Blizzard, she ain't telling me, so maybe she'll tell you.
It's actually it's actually very funny because one of my friends, he's actually in the chat, Dracoris, he pointed out after I did the video where and from our podcast, I said she had that pin on her. Remember, I noticed the pin, that's the goblins, yep. And the fact that Kazan was in the background. And I've done this whole video about how that's proof that we're going to Undermine. Dracoris said, you know, it might just be that she really likes goblins because she really does love goblins. She adores them. But all that tells me now that it's confirmed is that's why I predicted it so accurately, because I also really love goblins. So it's down to, if you're going to do goblins, this is how it has to be done. And clearly, people who love goblins as much as I do are in charge. And that's why we're getting everything coming out the way I said it was going to be.
I do have to say, even if she loved goblins, even if she was the biggest goblin fan in the world, that pin, that background is too many coincidences.
I agree.
It just cannot exist that way. So yeah, you like, as soon as you put out that video, I'm just like, yeah, no. Maybe one and somebody else was wearing a different pin and blah, 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 blah. But no, that is them hiding Easter eggs. And so, yep, like, I guess I'm coming down on you for not celebrating your W as much as you should, for kind of underselling Discordian. I don't know how. We're gonna say Kitty Stradamus.
Rather call me Kitty Sandra, because quite often people don't listen to me when I make predictions.
Okay. So, but with all of that, we know so much and yet so little of where we're going. It is in that trailer that I saw so much, and it looks like they are reusing a bit of the Kazan properties there. When they have one scene where it is that big mining machine, but you can see sort of a cave entrance behind it, and you look out there, and it looks kind of like there's some assets from Zuldazar. It would be kind of cool if they were going close to there, because we've got like the Undermine um there. um Sorry, not there, but we've got the Undermine, but we also have the Motherlode coming back, and so like maybe they're showing how those are somewhat connected. I don't know where the Undermine is supposed to be in the real world, other than like somewhere in and around Kazan, right?
Well, it's below Kazan. Kazan has actually changed on the map a few times, and even now it can be tricky to know exactly where it is, because if you look at the world map and you zoom in on the Maelstrom, you see Kazan is there. But if you look at the map in Chronicle, Kazan is actually quite close to Kalimdor. It's to the right of Kalimdor, like just off the coast. So it's one of those cases of different maps give you a different impression, because that's generally how maps work, is different scaling can make things confusing. And what I noticed when I was doing my video about Siren Owl and Undermine is that Undermine's original location was either where we see Pandaria is now, or where Kazalgar is now. So Kazan is in this area. It is somewhere between Kalimdor and definitely Zandalar. I would say it. I would absolutely peg it as quite close to Zandalar. In fact, sort of north of Pandaria, west of Zandalar. So that works out. It's also worth remembering that we will probably meet Zandalari trolls in Kazan, because the last time we were there, trolls were still being kept as slaves. Well, in Undermine. They were actually in Kazan as well, because Zandalari trolls originally were keeping the goblins as slaves, and then the goblins mined Kajamite, and it started a revolution, and they took over, and then they flipped the switch and they took the trolls as slaves. And that's the situation as it was when we left. And obviously, Talanji is not going to be thrilled about her people still being slaves if they are still slaves. And since Kazan, we can assume, is under the control of the venture company, they wouldn't have released them. So I think the Zandalari are going to play quite an important role in Undermine. We're going to have to help release them.
I would be really happy to see it, only if it means that they are once again including other races that are there. I am unsure if it is going to be the venture company that is going to be the biggest bad, because the way that they put it out there, they had, I believe it was 4 different factions, and that were going to be, butting heads for their market share. We'll call it market share of Kazan. And so one of them was, of course, the Steam Weedle
Cartel.
and the cartel. Like, because it's 4 cartels. So like there's the Steam Widow cartel, the Venture Co, as you mentioned. Who were the other 2?
I feel like I should have written this down because I don't remember. I was too excited by what came immediately afterwards.
Well, the goblins themselves that we use in the Horde, they are one of the cartels.
I believe they Steam Weedle.
No. Because Steam Weedle is the ones that are Gadgetzan and, Tanaris, Gadgetzan, you'll see them around Booty Bay,
Oh, it's Bilgewater.
right? There you go, right? So Bilgewater is the faction that is friendly with the Horde. The other three are neutral or hostile. I wonder if that'll cause you to start like a little bit more in line with one of those cartels if you are what Alliance versus Horde, or if they'll just ignore that.
Oh, I'd love to see some more flavor. I mean, I'm just so excited to get such a chance to fully explore goblin culture to this extent. And I would love to see, goblins have always very traditionally gotten on really well with the Horde, but they have had their allegiance with the Alliance before as well. So some Alliance-themed goblins would be great, I think. I'd love to explore that. I really hope we get that goblin and gnome couple back again. I can't remember what their names were, but they're very cute. It's a goblin and gnome who are in love, and they're engineers, and they used to hate each other. I hope we get to see them.
It would be great if they switch it around and that she has to be all like incognito while in this expansion,
Oh
or
my
rather,
word. Can you imagine if she's
in the
wearing little
Undermine?
goblin ears that keep falling off?
It's like, oh, what's with your goblin? She looks quite pale. It's like, oh, she's sick. That'd be great. That would be the best continuation of the bit.
Absolutely.
But like, it is 4 different ones, and the reason that I bring that up is that I think that what we're going to see with this like rise or return of Gallywix, that Gallywix might have created a 5th cartel that is causing issues, and so the other 4 are like, how are we getting displaced? Maybe they're fighting with each other at first, and then they realize, oh my goodness, it was Gallywix all along.
I mean, I'm really, really curious to see more of Gallywix. I really do love him as a villain. And, you know, the last time we saw him, I've said this a few times now, is he was hanging out with the brokers. And I would love to see what he got from that. I mean, that's got to be, he must have gotten some good stuff from that meeting. I mean, he basically had nothing and he was negotiating with some of the most internationally powerful people in the universe, in the cosmology. Not powerful, but like sneaky.
Influential,
yes. So I wonder if we will see some brokers as part of his cartel as well. I actually do like the idea that he is not the leader of the venture company after all, even though that's what I assumed would happen. Because the concept of a cartel that he started from the ground up would also be really interesting. Especially, I do love a good villain return story where it did feel like we had effectively dismantled them and they come back stronger than ever. And Gallywix, of all the villains in World of Warcraft, feels like he could literally come back with nothing more than maybe 1 coin and come back stronger than ever.
Well, there's like a couple of things because, okay, the raid itself is an 8-boss raid. That is the liberation of Undermine, which definitely makes it feel like a hostile takeover has happened. Whether it is one of the cartels that we know, I'm not going to say exactly love, having gained an unfair advantage and taken over, or if it is this sudden like rise of the 5th column that has just become like, well, we've got all the power now. Sorry, goblins, your entire balance of power has been like overruled by Gallywix and the brokers, and the fact that he's now, I don't know, hired Nexus Princess to take out his enemies, and so now she's back. He's like, oh, good. He's willing to pay me enough. I'll take you on now. Like, there's a lot of things that can easily connect from what we've seen in the past, and I really love this most of all because it's a great way of moving things forward in a very natural way. But I've got to ask you, a lot of people have been already complaining, saying that going to the Undermine, dealing with the goblins, feels like a side story. And I don't feel that. Do you feel that?
I don't feel that because I've had my sights set on Undermine basically since the war within it. I've always known it was coming in the story. The story is definitely driving that way. But also because of the way they've been introducing it, and because of some stuff I discovered while researching the story, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is, yes, quite often goblins and gnomes, for that matter, are treated as a bit of a side story, a bit of a joke. But that's what, like, they really are introducing it in a way that shows that it's meant to be a serious part of the story. It's building on elements that were important to the story for a long time. So, specifically, first of all, again, it's something I bring up a lot. Gallywix and the goblins were the first ones to discover Azurite, and it was years before anyone else even knew it existed. It was before the Cataclysm, because they were digging in the Undermine and they cut into something that was liquid at first, so basically bleeding, and then it crystallized into Azurite. That was the first case of Azurite in history. And that suggests to me that they were digging so deep they got to the world soul and they cut into the world soul, and that's why that happened. So that's immediately incredibly central to the story that we're working with, because it's all about the world soul, which is at the center of Azeroth and the threat to the world soul. So Undermine, I strongly believe Undermine reaches all the way to Azeroth's world soul, and that it might even be the way that we get there first, instead of going through the core way or anything else like that. Secondly, there's the Arathi, the strange Arathi connection to the goblins. Obviously, we will be expanding on this more during Siren Isle, but it's not it's as groups of people, you couldn't think of them as more different, like the Arathi feel very central to main storyline. The human elves, which is like, two of the main important races of WoW are the humans and the elves. It would be like having orc trolls. They're obviously very connected with the light. Everyone knows the Arathi are important. Everyone knows the Arathi Empire is going to be important. And they're so upstanding and like Holy Paladin and churchy, and they really feel like old Alliance, or like older versions of what you would think of as the Alliance. Whereas the goblins couldn't be more unlike them if they tried. It's a completely different type of race, completely different characteristics. Again, goblins tend to be more jokey, sort of humorous, and while the Arathi are more serious, and yet they keep having these weird little coincidences that clearly means they're similar in certain ways. And I think that is going to be expanded on. I think it's important. I think we're going to see how the goblins are actually incredibly important to the main story, how their association with things like the light, it's a different perspective, but I think it's going to end up being incredibly vitally important, not only in the War Within, but as we go into future story dealing with things like the light. So, yeah. Also, I just love goblins. I mean, I could happily go live in Undermine. I love going back to Kazan. I've played through the original goblin starting area about 50,000 times, and every time I do, I just love it. I love driving around the area. It's one of my favorite places in the entire game. I don't see how you can be upset going to Undermine. Like, come on.
For me, I think that one thing that people haven't been paying attention to, or maybe hasn't been popularized, is I don't think we hit the world soul in 11.2, and therefore in the War Within. I think what Kazan, what the Undermine is setting up, And what they have just started whispering about is the real end line of what Xal'atath is working towards in her phase 1. And that's the manifold, that cage that is trapping the world soul. I don't think that the Undermine reached the world soul itself, but they got to the manifold, and that could be really cool, because if they got to part of the manifold, if they've reached this old Titan tech, what if goblins with their like newfound intelligence got a lot of the abilities and the technology that they have made that is so unstable because they were reverse engineering Titan tech, right? And then that sort of like, I know this would be a bit of a retcon. I know that this would cause some stuff, but they would have to get somehow past the manifold to get to the world soul, right? So they would either have to like, it would be a MacGuffin either way. They either got to the manifold and ignored it, got past the manifold without the manifold stopping influence from something other than the Titans, which is exactly what the manifold is meant to prevent, or they got to the manifold, started messing with it, and that's why we have now Xal'atath going there, because it's like, wait a second, direct access to the manifold, I can shut that down and start going towards the world soul. That, to me, I think is what her initial plan is. Get to the manifold, disable the manifold, and then Midnight is the full-on dark attack.
Now, the name of Midnight does suggest that whatever happens, Xal'atath wins the victory. A lot of people have speculated that Midnight is the Void has won. So we're literally dealing with a void-covered world. But the fact that you brought up Midnight has kind of diverted my attention, because I can't help but think about what they announced coming for Midnight. It's player housing. Player housing. And I have to say again, I was right, because although this one was less amazing, because before the Wowcast started, I hadn't actually done, hadn't watched any speculation about it. I saw people had posted videos saying that some of the stuff was already leaked, and there was a whole bunch of speculation about what was going to be announced, and I hadn't really been paying attention. I actually didn't even know what the Wowcast was for a while, because I just saw people talking about it, but I was like, I don't know. So I went into it not knowing, like, for all I knew, they could have been announcing a new mobile game. And I posted on Blue Sky. I don't know anything about it, but obviously my prediction is player housing. And I did that as a joke, because I thought if there's one thing where they won't announce player housing, I mean, I always say player housing, but I even thought the one place they won't announce player housing is during one of these things. Player housing is a BlizzCon announcement, not or like a new expansion coming out announcement. It's not and by the way, player housing announcement. But I was right, they announced player housing. I'm so excited.
we have to talk about that, though. Like, the fact that this was a almost, and by the way, one last hype thing, player housing is coming with Midnight. That is insane. The fact that it is so far ahead of Midnight, which means they are committed to this bit, and they likely have even more stuff that they want to put out there and be like, guys, let me tell you, this is the big stuff, right? Is insane. But player housing, when you look at it in the sense of how they've been rolling out the expansion for not just Midnight, which we've barely started scratching. This is the first indication of anything coming from Midnight. But also how things have been in the War Within and Dragonflight. they said that they were going to bring in foundational changes that would have long-lasting effects upon the World of Warcraft going forward. And you can definitely say player housing is that. You can definitely say that warband seems like a fundamental adjustment to how we engage with Warcraft. And I would say to no lesser extent that dynamic flight and formerly known as dragon flying, now skywriting, right, has dramatically changed how I played World of Warcraft. So they are hitting this every expansion that they've got something at a fundamental change that is locomotion, that is where we put up our feet, that is how we spend time in amongst our characters. This is insane.
So I think one of the things about player housing is, I do agree it's very foundational. It's extremely transformative. And I hope that it's treated the way that I see it in other MMOs and not like garrisons. But they know not to do garrisons, so I don't think we're going to have garrisons again. But that said, one of the reasons why, even though I am so excited for player housing, it is the best thing they could have announced. I don't want anything else. That's all I've ever wanted. It's always been the single thing. Despite that, I do think actually announcing it this way is a good sign, because player housing shouldn't be an expansion feature to the point where they're expecting absolutely everyone to do it whether they want to or not. That was one of the fundamental problems with garrisons. That was the first mistake with garrisons, is they forced everyone into those garrisons whether they were interested or not. And that is not, and they wanted to build the whole expansion around the garrison. And while I actually really enjoyed that a lot, I loved my garrison, I still love my garrison, it also was depressing, because when you're around people who don't enjoy the thing you love and they're being forced to do it, they complain about it a lot, for good reason, because nobody should be forced into doing something they don't want to do in a game where you're supposed to be playing it for fun. And so I couldn't even enjoy garrisons to the extent that I should have been able to, because of how everyone else was complaining about it so much. So I hope, but I believe that player housing will be one of those things. Instead of comparing it to dynamic flight, I would rather, I think, or even warbands, I think warbands, the theory that warbands is something that was developed with player housing in mind is a good one. But I think warbands has prepped people for player housing in a way where it won't become something that you have to opt into, and that if you don't, you're going to suffer. Because the reason I say that is the way player housing works in Elder Scrolls Online is it's a collectible. It's like a mount. It's like a toy. You collect a house, and everyone gets the easy houses because they give those to you. So nobody goes around. Nobody doesn't have a mount. Everyone in World of Warcraft has a mount, especially these days. You get one right away. You get a flying mount right away. But you don't necessarily get the most, you don't necessarily get the Ashes of Alar unless you really want it. And I think player housing is going to be the same way. You will still have the houses, the easy houses, if they have any utility. For utility, those will be given out basically free of charge. This is the quest. Go do it. You've got your house. I really hope they're collectible across characters in the same way they are in in Elder Scrolls Online, because that makes it, you don't want to go get the same house over and over again, the same way you don't want to get the same mount over and over again. But don't force people. If you don't want to engage with it any more than you got it, they gave you the house and it's done, then you shouldn't have to. I'm a strong advocate for people who don't want player housing should not feel forced into caring about it at all.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the Elder Scrolls model, because I'm aware of the Final Fantasy model, and as I've been telling the Final Fantasy model to players, they have just turned goblin green. They're like, no, it can't be like that, because I'll take a little bit of time to explain the Final Fantasy model. Final Fantasy Online, as a critically acclaimed and award-winning as it is, people apparently really dislike its housing model. The way it works is that there is, every so often, plots of land will become available, and players will bid against each other, and the high bidder will gain that plot of land until the next rotation. It makes for a incredible gold sink because the players are pushing against each other. It also means that like somebody's not going to typically be able to hold the housing all the time because they just won't be able to keep up the funds in order to outbid their friends. So there's that. But of course, that means that like for many players, they won't be able to do it. They'll be upset. They'll be like, "Oh man, I'm not Richie Rich. I can never get player housing." But eventually, it becomes like sort of like one of those goals that people will get together their gold, and they will get in to get a house, even if it's not the first one on the list. They'll be like, "Yeah, I got the like plot." I'm gonna say Riften, but that Riften is Elder Scrolls. I got the plot in whatever Final Fantasy place, and they'll be happy about that. They'll be able to rearrange it and do whatever they were wanting to do for a period of time, and then they'll lose access to it, and it'll again become that carrot on the stick for them. But players hate that. Every time I mention that, they're like, no, housing must be available to all. We've got a housing crisis in real life. Why are you trying to do this to my video game, man?
Absolutely. I don't want... I'm a millennial. I don't need to deal with another housing crisis.
I am channeling people's trauma, and I am sorry for it.
So
tell us how the Elder Scrolls system works.
Before I do, is it true that if you don't have game time, you lose your house? Because someone told me that's what happens with Final Fantasy, and I thought that was the scummiest thing I've ever heard in my life. Can you imagine?
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. It's like, hey, listen, like, you're not playing. Why are we going to let you sit on this house? We're going to put it out to the market for people who are currently playing. That to me seems like not scummy at all. To me seems like player friendly.
No, I hate it. Okay, so let me tell you about the Elder Scrolls model. So this is the model that I believe that not only do I believe they should follow this model, I believe for the most part they will follow this model, because I think this model lends itself to World of Warcraft. It lends itself to World of Warcraft really well, and I also think it's something that it makes it easier to put into the game after the fact, because obviously one of the biggest problems with player housing has always been World of Warcraft is a really old game. Coding in something like that can be difficult, and it has been difficult because they've been working on this for years based on rumors, and it's taken them this long until they finally got it in a state where they feel like they can announce it. So the way it works in Elder Scrolls is it is zoned. Your houses are zoned in the same way that garrisons are, which I think there's no way to avoid that essentially with World of Warcraft. So we have seen that before already with garrisons, and also with the farm in Pandaria. If you go into your farm, it's your farm, it's your zone. But other people go to their farm. It's the same area, but, obviously zoned. And then you can invite people to your group to visit your house. So again, like garrisons. Obviously, I understand the drawback of that. Like the nice thing about Final Fantasy is that you end up in a neighborhood. You have neighbors. You get to know them. People come to your house. It's your house. It's nobody else's. That is nice. I definitely see the appeal of that. But I think ultimately, the fact that makes it so limiting, and then World of Warcraft constantly has to make new areas to accommodate more people for more housing, I just think that's a nightmare, like an unnecessary nightmare. Whereas with the phasing idea, first of all, you can put it anywhere. So established cities can end up with houses in them in the future. And I have a little bit of a conspiracy brain. I have had for some time. Have you noticed how every place, especially in the War Within, they have these big cities that are filled with, first of all, front doors, and secondly, entire rooms that are big enough to move around in. Like if you wanted to role play that you had a house, you could already, because there's plenty of places all over the War Within. And it's not just in the main city, it's every zone, and even in the villages in the zones. I mean, there's a village in the Isle of Dawn, Freywood Village. I was running around at that for ages at some point because I was convinced they're going to put a player house there. It's just crazy how it feels like they've already got it for you. In fact, there was an area in Isle of Dawn, not in Isle of Dawn, in the Ringing Deeps, where I found a door that clearly had something behind it. You could see that the door was just a barrier, and I was like, oh, is this going to be a house? Is this a house? Is this a player house? And then I carried on with the quest line, and it turned out to be where the kobolds live. So it did open up. But the point is, that technology is there. They can put in the door and then later on open it up. We've already speculated that the causeway, that door at the bottom of the causeway, will open up at a later stage. Like literally all you need for a house is a doorway. So in the Elder Scrolls, when you make a character early on, you get a quest at an inn. And it's the inn at like the main city. So in World of Warcraft, the equivalent would be Stormwind and Orgrimmar. You get a quest saying you can get a room in an inn. You go into the inn, go to the room, walk in, that's your room. What I like about it that makes it better than garrisons is because it's located in such a hot area, an area that people are moving around in. As the moment you leave that room, you are surrounded by people who are also going to their rooms. So you do feel that sense of community regardless, even though it's not quite like having neighbors. You still get to feel like you're in a living world. There are people around you. Then when you enter the room, it phases you into your own place. And then you can decorate the room according to whatever decorations you have. It is limited, so you can put down maybe... It depends on the size of the room. So if your room is an inn room, you can put down maybe 3 pieces of big furniture, 1 trophy on the wall, a couple of like knickknacks around the place, a pet. So you can put in 1 animal. If you want that animal to be a horse, you can have a horse sitting in the middle of your inn. But that's the limitations, is you have different types of furniture based on, as I say, like the trophy is its own type of furniture. A bed is a bed and a table share furniture slots, basically. And then the bigger places, you've got more area that you can put furniture around in. So your little room is always going to be extremely limited. The most use you're going to get out of it, and this is what I love about it, and I don't think they'll do this for the World of Warcraft, but I wish they do, is the rooms are portals. So you open up your collection, you go to houses, you click on my room in Stormwind, and you teleport to Stormwind. And that's what houses basically are. They're portals. But the easiest houses are in the locations that you want them to be. The big houses, the really impressive, difficult ones that take a long time to get, they're not in important, like they're in cool locations, but it's not, you need to have this house if you want to get to the raid quickly kind of thing. They're more a little bit out of the way, you know? So nobody feels compelled to have the house just for the portal. They've done it so well, the way they've organized it, because you don't feel like you don't feel like you have to have the portals that they offer, but the fact that they offer portals is nice. So I would say if they did it the same way, they'd have to make it work kind of like the portal room, where you're using it to get around the major cities. But
do Do you own multiple homes in the Elder Scroll? Can you like
Yes.
have like okay.
And it's cross accounts. So one of the things I told you about the room in an inn, there's several of these rooms. I think there's 6, but you can only get 1 per character. But you log in with 6 different characters, you get 6 different rooms. All of your characters now have access to all 6 rooms. So it's like kind of encourages you to collect, to have different characters and also to collect across account, which I think is something that Blizzard is leaning into with World of Warcraft with warbands. I definitely think account-wide houses is a great idea. My only concern is, what if you want to decorate it differently for different... Actually, I think you can decorate it differently in Elder Scrolls Online. I'm not sure now. But you would want different decorations for different classes.
Okay.
Now, the reason I say... that the Elder Scrolls, they're following the model, is simply when they show you the preview in that video, you see swords on the wall, a shield on the wall, little ornaments, and Onyxia's head, a trophy. And that's how decoration works in Elder Scrolls Online, is you have these objects. Trophies are a big one. So you get your trophy that you got from finishing a raid or whatever, and you put it up in the wall. I mean, like, how cool is that? I love the idea.
Yeah, I think that trophies have to be a part of it. Like, you kill a boss, you get to put that dragon head or whatever on the wall. The broken staff from defeating the Shade of Medivh or something like that. If you defeat it on like Mythic, the only thing that changes is that like the mantling changes a little bit, so it shows like, oh, this is the Mythic version, but like it's still the same dragon head sort of thing. So you get your bragging rights that way. You collect various legendaries, and you can have those mounted, or just like whatever appearances you've unlocked. So it like links into transmog there. I think that the big question would be like, how do they use player housing? I think that player housing could be the next level of gold sync. Already transmog is like transmog is a big level, but like as you get those larger plots, it could be a thing. It could even be something like Animal Crossing, where it's like or the Warband Bank, where it's like, hey, your base one, pretty cheap, pretty accessible. You want to get yourself that second floor or that wine cellar or whatever. Now that's going to add to the cost that you're going to need to invest.
Well, again, the Elder Scrolls model is incredible. So I don't believe they have expanding the actual house. I think that is definitely a very cool idea. But what they do have is they have different varying sizes. So you've got the little room, that's the smallest type you can get, but you get these huge mansions that you honestly, most people don't buy for themselves. They'll buy it for a guild and use it as guild housing. One of my earliest memories in Elder Scrolls Online is traveling through Morrowind, and just seeing this giant black castle, just massive. I think it's called Nightingale or Night Chateau or something like that, or Ebon Chateau or something like that. Just this beautiful giant black castle. And I was like, that's so cool. I want to see what that is. I rode up to it, and they let you go in and look around before you buy. And it's stunning. It's got gardens, it's got a stable, like it's just, and you can also preview it fully furnished as well. And it's just a gorgeous thing. This is one of the houses that guilds buy. But it is crazy expensive, and this is my favorite, you need an achievement to unlock it. And it's a hectic achievement. It's like a meta achievement. Now imagine the meta achievement for the Dragon Isles gets you a castle in the Dragon Isles. It just unlocks so much potential. It's I think the way people collect mounts is going to be nothing compared to the way people collect houses. And it feels good because you're like, you deserve this because you worked for it. And the other thing that's huge is professions. All the professions make various furniture for the houses. So if you want tables, that's obviously carpenters, which we don't have, but I'm sure they'll figure something else. Can you imagine leather workers making chairs and stuff? Engineers will be able to make toys and trinkets. Also, the toys that we already have in our toy box can work as a lot of ornaments. I love the idea of being able to use your pets and your mounts as furniture, as decoration as well. They can be walking around. But also, like, maybe you have, it has to be a guild kill. So, like, what do you call it? You know, when you guild, what's it, ahead of the curve. Maybe your guild gets ahead of a curve. They can now buy this guild house. You know, it's another, and then everyone teams together to pay for it. It's another way to have people bond. But that said, there's a danger, because if I wanted to go buy that mansion in Elder Scrolls without getting the achievement, I can. I just have to pay real money. Because in the Elder Scrolls Online, the one thing I really hate is you can either buy it with gold and have gotten all the recommended achievements and all of that, or you can bypass it all by buying it with crystals. And crystals is the in-game currency that you buy with real money, and then you don't have to do anything else. You just have to have the crystals. So that it loses meaning. It's like, why would I work for this when I could just buy it, you know? And that, I think that would ruin it if they did that with World of Warcraft. That said, I do expect us to see a lot of furniture used in the trading post. I think the trading post was partially introduced for this reason, because it's a great place to sell things. Because the Elder Scrolls Online has these, they have these, it's seasonal things that you can buy. My one in room has nothing in it except for this incredibly intricate, beautiful music box that they were selling on. It was just that month they had it on the store, and I had crystals because you get them if you subscribe. And I was like, this music box serves no purpose. I'm never going to use it. I don't even play this game, but I love it so much, and I bought it. And like, I can definitely see things like that. You can even get houses. I mean, in the winter months, you can get a house in a snow globe, which I think is the best idea ever, and I really hope we see that here. And yeah, I mean, it's so easy to add these things to the trading post, you know. I mean, I absolutely would I hardly spend my trading post tenders at all anymore these days, but in fact, at the moment, I'm kind of saving them because I expect there's going to be things like candles and chairs that I need to get.
Yeah, I think they can lock in a bunch of different systems. You've already talked about how professions can do that, and you get, like, you know, a tailor to do a really nice rug, or a leather worker can do like the bearskin rug if you wanted to do that sort of thing. I would absolutely love, if they bring back some systems that they had used before. Garrison's being like the forerunner of this. There was a music box where you could get all those different records. Oh, yes. Like, just immediately shift that over to player housing, where it's like, if you own this, congratulations. If you don't, we'll throw it in the trader's post, and then you can go back and get all these different records, and we're adding new records that you can get from all these different bosses, and just have it go from there. I think that if, yeah, you have your favorite pets, they will show up. We already had that system where you invite people to your party, and it's like, go to party leader's garrison, same sort of way that people could go to your abode, as it were. My concern isn't so much the pay of it all, because I just think that in general it's cosmetic, so it shouldn't, it like, they want to throw in like, hey, on the store, buy this, and then you also get tenders. I think we're kind of past that point or already. And as somebody who is, you know, quote unquote resistant to it, I see it as just something where It's the same thing when they put out this Brutosaur pet. It's like, I'd really love to have that, but I also have no money. Sorry, no money. I also have no money. We'll count that too. But I also have no desire to spend the money that I don't have on a mount. That would like end up being more expensive than if I had gotten the collector's edition of the pretty much more as expensive as if I had gotten the collector's edition of the expansion it became available in. That to me, that is just how I value my money and how I will value my time. And I think the same equation goes in for any of these real money purchases that they would put into a house. What I am mostly concerned about with player housing, and one of the reasons that I am not against models where it's like they're guaranteed to limit the amount of people who engage with it, is because I do not want this to be much like Garrisons, where people have more and more incentives and pull to engage in a system that they might not otherwise engage in. I want this to be like pet battling, where everybody who loves pet battles can like go all in and level their pets to 25 and collect all these different families. And the people who don't might once in a while come across a pet, might once in a while come across a furniture and be like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything with that. That's the level of engagement I want. And when you start throwing in stuff with portals, seem like the way that you put it forward seems relatively innocuous, seems relatively harmless, so I'm not going to say that. But let's say they put in workbenches in that you could like set up a workbench in your home, because why not? Seems real fine. Except now I'm going to start using this separate portal cooldown to get back there to go to the workbench, because that's more convenient than actually going to Dornergall or whatever the current expansion is. And like those sort of conveniences kind of creep together. Like if there was a workbench but no portal and I would have to go back to, let's say, Silvermoon, because that's where it's located, to get to it, well then that workbench doesn't have much value, right? It's the combination of things that start coming together that would then be like, yeah, I know you don't want this mount, but if you want to get on the auction house from anywhere and then mail the stuff or pick up the stuff from the mail, really this mount is the best thing to do, and maybe you really should spend that money. And that's the level of like creeping power convenience that I am worried about with player housing.
I think you make an excellent point, and I think it's one of the biggest risks and dangers. It is what killed garrisons. You need a reason for people to leave, and to leave often. And they didn't have that in garrisons. In garrisons, you had access to everything you could possibly need. Now, in the Elder Scrolls, I do think that you get workbenches at some point, but I never got to the point where I could afford that myself. So because they worked as portals, it actually made a city feel all alive, because people would go back to the city a lot, and then they'd all be going to the same areas. You know, you'd be walking from your house to the trading area where you go work on your professions, and they have tables similar to how we have tables now. And like that's what you want. You want the housing to make cities feel alive. You don't want housing to make everyone isolated in their houses and make the cities themselves feel dead. So I'm really unsure about utility, because on the one hand, that's the danger. On the other hand, it feels weird to not be allowed to have like an alchemy room where you do your alchemy, in your house. So I think it would have to be one or the other. You can't have either. And I think it would probably be more there'd be utility in the houses, but getting to them, there'd probably be places that are closer that are more convenient to get to for that utility. Because you can't have people shut in like that. And I think it's important. I also think we'll probably see less utility in the beginning as they test the waters, because it is very important not to overdo it with the utility. And we've seen this before, is these days when they introduce something new, they kind of start off very slow. And then if that's fine, then they're willing to add in other more fun aspects. Because that's the thing. Housing should be because you want to decorate a house. That's it. That's all it should be. Like running around the theater in Isle of Dawn with the broom, when you get the task to sweep. That's what I want. I want a broom and I want to sweep my house. That's what I want. I don't want to go to my house to talk. I don't want auctioneers at the house. I don't see why we should have auctioneers at the house. There's no reason for them. I don't want to trade at my house. That's what the marketplace is for. I do think maybe some at home, maybe it could be like you can do some stuff at home, but like for bigger ticket stuff, you have to go into like your workshop because, I think it's possible that it's to have trading, like to have profession posts in Elder Scrolls. I think it's possible that you can only do it with really big houses. So then potentially you could put it in a guild house. Then at least you're still being social because you're having your guild meet together. You're seeing everyone in your guild. That's something. I still think it's a bit isolationist, but at least that's something,
Yeah, especially with the people who would likely get there first being the absolute goblins that would then be like, I'm going to have because they already have their own guild that is gold capped. And now they put all their profession stuff in there and they put all their alts and be like, you're parked there. And I'm going to make the stuff because I'll go around Dornagal and I'll see other people by the profession benches. And then there'll be that one guy who's got their Brutosaur or their gilded Brutosaur that'll be just off there, and it'll be like, oh, thank goodness that guy's there. I don't have to mount up on my own, or I don't have to run off to the mailbox. And we'll do that. And half of those people, they're gonna disappear. They're gonna disappear into the instance version of the shop.
You know what they should?
Go ahead.
They should say that if you try to summon your Brutosaur inside a house, even in your gardens, it should say, no, too big. This particular mount is too big. You should not have access to an auction house inside people's houses. That's definitely something I think is a bad idea.
Yeah. So it's again, they will need to be careful and in some cases go out of their way to limit the functionality of these houses so that they are, just fun cosmetic things.
They must be cosmetic, not like they can be a bit functional, but only a bit. They mustn't be the main source of function. Yeah.
And I think that the issue is that because the game has gone so long without not guild houses, without player housing, they need to be careful about how player housing is implemented, because a lot of the stuff is just you pull it along with your character. If I can't mount my Brutosaur, I could still have like a pet or a mobile mailbox that I can do with engineering and such. And if one alt throws down the mailbox and then I switch to another alt, craft a bunch of stuff and then throw it through that mailbox, and if that alt then throws down the mobile auction house that some engineers have been able to make in past expansions. I actually think it's been restricted at expansion, but that's all the sort of things that they need to make. And if they make these player housing, how does that affect future professions as well? Not just in, hey, you can make stuff for player housing, but also you really can't make this anywhere because we need you to leave your player house in order to do these sought after things. And people hate the workbenches for that. They're already up in arms where they're like, oh, I have to go running to Dornagal to make my gem, and Blizzard, please, I used to be able to make my gem in the middle of the raid, yada, yada, yada. These are all balancing factors that Blizzard now needs to consider with this. So it's going to be very interesting.
The one thing I will say is Blizzard holding off on player housing for so long, and also having a failed attempt at player housing before, makes me very hopeful for what we will get in the end. Because anything we can think of that could be a problem, they're acutely aware of. I've seen people complaining, oh, it's going to be garrisons. And it's such a stupid thing to say, because if there's one thing it's not going to be, is garrisons. Because Blizzard knows. Blizzard was so scared straight from garrisons. We didn't get player housing until now, because it was such a disaster. They made so many mistakes with garrisons that they are not going to make again. And I think they're more likely to err on the side of caution. And I would be happy with it. I think most people who care about player housing would be. Because it's not the utility. I don't care. I genuinely don't care. I think it would be stupid if a house doesn't have a mailbox, because a house should have a mailbox. I would love to be able to put my Perch of Unhura up in my house, But that's about the extent of what I would want. I don't care about utility. I want to decorate. I want it to look nice. But I do wonder about the workbenches, because, again, they're a fairly new feature, and they do feel like something that would make sense in a house, because then you can build a whole room around the workbench, I wonder what would be the best way.
And then I'm going to put that workbench directly beside the mailbox.
No, but you
so
see,
that I can take advantage of it.
The way they do these houses, they can actually stop you from doing that potentially. Maybe there's only one spot that you're allowed to put the mailbox, and then the choice there is you choosing what the mailbox is going to be, what type of mailbox you put down. But that is definitely, then you can have like a room that's got a workbench in it, but it's going to be on the other side of your house. So if you want to run back and forth, you can. But like maybe they should have just like little frustrating things like that, so that it just makes more sense to go into town. That kind of thing.
And all the players will scream, and it'll be like, Blizzard, why is this set up this way? Okay, fine. I'm gonna have the smaller house for I'm sorry, for my work army. Sorry, you don't get good housing. You get the smallest house, so that the workbench is as close to the mailbox as possible.
I think
and if you don't like it,
I think they should make it so that the mailbox isn't a decoration. It's outside where houses are. They should just have a mailbox, but you get to customize how the mailbox looks to you.
I would love customizing the mailbox. I think that is a great thing to put in. I also makes me immediately go, I want her character houses to be customized, because I want my Tauren to like have it all set up Tauren chic, baby, like straight off the plains style. But my goblin may not like that. My warlock and his orc heritage might want something a little different in the aesthetic. So I would want it to be per character, because that also increases how much of a gold sink this would be. Because I could see like the absolute mad lad that's like, I'm changing my transmog, and that means I need a mount that matches and a Hearthstone, and guess what? We're remodeling, folks. And they just spend the stream remodeling their house.
Can you imagine, again with the professions? Because not only that, but if you're a Tauren who wants your nice Tauren aesthetic, you have to go to a Tauren craftsman for all of the things that you want. If you want Tauren toys, you need to go to a Tauren engineer. If you want Tauren furniture, a Tauren leatherworker, because they're the only ones who can do it in that style. Like, I think that would be brilliant. So you can have Blood Elf furniture from Blood Elves, etc.
I think it would be great to learn it from those people, but I do think that it should be available to anybody. And I also think that, like, obviously the base house should be able to come from a number of different things. I do not want to be like a gnome that is forced to do the Stormwind Castle motif for my look, or a Nightborn that's like, well, I guess I'm Orgrimmar chic.
One of the things that they said about garrisons that they believed failed, that they knew was a problem, was the fact that it was only the two types, the human for the humans and the orc, for the alliance, and the orc aesthetic for the horde. And they said, one of the first complaints they got from people was, but I'm a blood elf. What if I want my blood elf? I want my blood elf looking architecture. Why can't I have that? And the problem was it was just too much work. They couldn't do it, not for those garrisons. So they tried their best. They introduced things like banners, but they knew that was a problem. And I think if garrisons had maybe been more successful and they could be more streamlined, they would have introduced that. But by then it was a done deal. I don't think they would introduce player housing without more than one option to reflect the different races. I don't think that's something they would do. And I think some evidence for that is, again, the way we can see the war within a setup. They've put so much work into the architecture. These zones all have it's full cities, like proper cities, every single zone, that all have their own aesthetic, their own design, their own rooms, spaces, furnishings. Like you can see, it feels like that particular team has been expanded.
Yeah, it feels insane to me that anybody from like top to bottom would say, oh, the solution for the garrison issue is that we'll give them more rugs to throw over their spikes. It's just not.
It's not going to work. Doesn't help.
Issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited because one of my biggest problems with garrisons was I fell in love with Silvermoon City. It wasn't it was never Orgrimmar. I've never liked Orgrimmar. I've always resented the fact that our main city is Orgrimmar. But this getting introduced in Midnight means that even if there's only one design each, then at least I will get the Blood Elf design. That's pretty much guaranteed.
I guarantee you it's not one each.
No,
there's just no way.
There's not a chance.
But also, don't hate on Orgrimmar like that. Orgrimmar is so much a metropolis. It's got its troll section. It's got its Tauren section. It's got a section that has so much inspiration from all these different cultures. It is so different now. And yes, it is now metal spikes instead of mud spikes, right? In many of the main metropolises. But at least that is so much a better step up from the sliding mudslide that it used to be. Don't hate on Orgrimmar. I'm having this argument with multiple people, and I will start sending you a picture a day of Orgrimmar to get that love back into you. But come on, it's
orange.
It's not as bad as you like.
The only thing I'll say from Orgrimmar is I preferred I don't think Orgrimmar is easier to navigate than Stormwind technically. But I know Orgrimmar like the back of my hand, and I don't know Stormwind City, and it doesn't matter how long I've been playing Alliance alts, Stormwind is so confusing to me. And that's the only reason I feel more comfortable in Orgrimmar.
I think Orgrimmar has just done such a better job of having like the hubs. Like you have, of course, like the Valley of Strength, Valley of Wisdom, the hubs that are just, here's your auction house, stone throw away, there's your inn, stone throw away, there's your mailbox. Like, for gameplay reasons, Orgrimmar is just so much easier to get business done.
Going around Orgrimmar when you can't fly yet is so much better than going around Stormwind when you can't fly yet. That's the worst.
Yeah. But like, I feel like there's no analog to the Park District in Orgrimmar. Like, Stormwind just has a bunch of featurettes, a bunch of landmarks that are just, they don't have the comparison of beauty in Orgrimmar, and that's what people will latch onto. But Orgrimmar's got just its cosmopolitan mesh of all of these cultures, and you won't get that in Stormwind. You'll get like a little banner on top saying like, yeah, this is where gnomes are. It's like, you shoved them to the corner. I see how it is. Don't think I don't notice, Stormwind. Anyways, that's a story for another day, and I think we've been going for an hour here.
We have, I've been monopolizing the conversation as well. I'm so sorry. I can talk about player housing forever. And I have to say one more thing before we wrap up. Which is, you were saying you were hoping that the houses will be individual that your alts don't share the decoration of the houses, you were saying. I think there's a strong chance that is how it will work. We won't share the decorations across alts, because if you start now looking at all these features they've been introducing that is potentially as part of laying the groundwork for houses, look at the dragons. The way that when you get a customizable dragon, everyone in your warband gets the dragon, but you do not share how that dragon looks. Everyone customizes it individually. I wish you could share it if you wanted to, because I hate having to redo it over and over again. But I think they've erred on the right side there, because your different characters have different personalities. They don't want to necessarily be riding the same dragon. They do each want to have their own look and feel. And I think we can rely on it being like that for housing as well.
That is reassuring, and I think you are right on that. But again, we have run out of time.
Yes.
So we will have to pick this conversation up in 2 weeks from now when we have our next episode.
Yes, it is 2 weeks from now. We have changed the schedule. We will not be every week. We will be once every 2 weeks going forward. So the next episode will be on the 29th of November. But for now, how's that? Oh, wait, no. Where can people find you, TruVillainManny?
Well, you said it. TruVillainManny. That's true without the E on all socials. Maybe not so much Twitter anymore, guys. Find me on Blue Sky. Everybody, look, it's all Blue Sky's sort of taken over. And I've been an early pusher of that, and I'm just going to say it, guys. Time to come to bluer skies. Find me over there. That is TruVillainManny, true without the E. And where can people find you?
I am Discordian Kitty across socials. Like you, I have finally made the full move to Blue Sky, so not so much on Twitter, but I'm on Blue Sky. And of course, you can find me on YouTube. My next video should be about the threat of the Arathi. So, and yeah, that's about it.
Well, until next time, Hail Xal'atath!
Hail Xal'atath!